Yeah,
But
yeah.
good to see you. I don't know how to address you. The last time I saw you, I addressed you as Art, but now it's
Be more respectful, son. Be a little bit more respectful.
Dr.
You know,
Delgado.
I had a teacher once when I was a principal who asked me to ask one of her coworkers the same question. How do I address the principal? Should I call him Mr. Delgado? Do I call him by his first name? So the teacher came and told me about that. And I said, tell her to address me as Your Majesty. Your Highness. That'll
Your
work.
Highness. There you go.
Hey there, welcome back to Pod and Deliver. Ruben, today we have a special guest. I love guests. And this one is a former superintendent of LA County Schools and San Bernardino Schools. I believe San Bernardino for 12 years and LA County for 5. I could be corrected. But thank you, Dr. Arturo Delgado. Welcome to Pod and Deliver.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be on board.
Oh man, I was wondering if you could let our audience know a little bit about your background. And I guess I should, before you do that, I should say that we have we know we've known you for 40 plus years as we were children when we first met you, and so it's a joy to have you here. But tell us a little bit about your background and education, just briefly, and just so we could start there.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's been a long time that we've known each other, and it's great to see the successes that the two of you have had, and so I'm thrilled to be on the podcast that you're leading here. So it's really wonderful. Um, well, my educational career started after 8 years of a career as a traffic officer with LAPD. So during that time, I was working to get myself through school and eventually became a teacher for a bilingual class in Baldwin Park. So I started in Baldwin Park as a teacher. And as the years continued, I saw my career begin to move forward as I continued my education. And so I got my master's and then became a principal of an elementary school in Azusa. Absolutely loved my experience. Best job in the world being a principal of an elementary school, but I just loved it. And I did that for 8 years, and then made a move to become work in the district office under human resources as a director first and an assistant superintendent in Alvord Unified. A lot of people don't know where Alvord is, in Riverside, and in the county of Riverside, and did that for about 3 years or so before I was called to recruit to work in San Bernardino City Unified School District as an assistant superintendent. So one district much larger than the other one. The one I was leading was smaller than the other one. So I saw that as a real move in the right direction for myself. What I didn't know was that a year and a half later, they would make me superintendent there of the district. So I didn't see that coming when I first got there. But I will say this: I just think the opportunities presented themselves as God led me in a particular direction, and I just always felt like God created a path and put me in places for specific reasons. And so I ended up the superintendent of San Bernardino City Schools, like you said, 12 years is correct. Not to be confused with San Bernardino County Schools. Okay, so this was different. This was the city school district. San Bernardino City School District was the largest school district in this county of San Bernardino. So we were the large district there. What happened was after a number of years, the county superintendent of schools in San Bernardino decided to retire. I felt like God was leading me to run for office to take that position as he vacated the position. I just felt strongly that was a direction for me. Felt I was being led in that direction. I mustered up a campaign that took me some time, of strong efforts, and when the election came up, I was soundly defeated, and which really caused me a lot of confusion. I said, Lord, I thought you wanted me to move in this direction. What happened? I thought certain this was the right thing for me, and but I was soundly defeated. And little did I realize that God had something else in mind. He did want me to be a county superintendent, but not in San Bernardino. A couple of months later, I got a call to apply for the job in LA County, which is the largest county office in the country. And the Board of Supervisors appoint that position. I did apply. 6 months later, I found myself in the office of the as a superintendent for Los Angeles County Office of Education. And you were correct. I was there for 5 years before I retired, and absolutely enjoyed every step along the way. So that's kind of the background. I was in education for 36 years.
Wow.
No, I was just going to say that the your trajectory started out in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And what, how does that happen? Law enforcement education, was it that you, I have friends who went to law enforcement and that was their dream as a child. Was that your dream first, or was it education? And man, I just don't like being in this system of law, law enforcement. How did
Yeah,
that work?
yeah, good question, Ruben. No, I was a young married dad and needed to work to pay bills. And so a traffic officer for LAPD was a civilian office, not a sworn officer. So I was a civilian officer, and I did glamorous things like direct traffic downtown LA and give parking tickets. So that was basically not a real glamorous job. Really, nobody likes to see the meter reader coming around giving parking tickets. So I did that really, and it really paid my way through college, which was the plan. Get myself to college. I was working full time and by day, and going to school full time by night. So and it helped take care of my two children at the time, house mortgage, and so it really just was a means to get me through my education. But I knew that I wanted to become a teacher down the road. So that's how that happened.
Actually, Art, the first time I ever saw you, I was a child, not that much younger than you. Maybe I should say a small child. But it was in the context of you singing at church, you and your wife. Might have been you first. I'm might have confused, but I remember you. You were just a really good. Didn't you play the piano?
Yeah, I played keyboards very badly, but I played, and I was part of worship teams, but mostly a faith-based rock band, religious group, right? So we were a group, we were called Soulful, Joyful Noise, and when we were Brady, you guys were there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so yeah, I was part of that with Betty Macias. You might remember that name. And so Mike Gonzalez and my brother was a part of it. My younger brother, and we enjoyed that a lot. But so on top of going to school full time, having a family, and going to church, and we were in a band, and we played all over the place. And that was a different life ago. Yeah, that was a different life ago.
You probably never.
I gave some good context though about kind of like you're a rounded out individual. Like there's a lot more to you than than the education aspect of it. I just think it's very interesting. You're a man of talent. I hate people like you. Anyway.
Yeah, right. You're one yourself. No, I tell you, we evolve over time, right? And you grow and you begin to see things a little differently as you age a little bit more, and you see a different purpose or where you are and what impact you can have. You grow, and so I would say that I did grow over time and began to see things a little bit more serious as I went along, and so yes, I had to make choices along the way. Do I continue to remain in the arts? Do I see a singing career ahead of me, or do I see myself being led in a different direction? And for me, the answer was I was being led in a different direction, and it had to do with the career in education.
But Art, I do also remember you at times leading discussions and Bible studies. And I say that because it's kind of, even though it seems different, I see it as a natural progression in a way because you did mentor people. Because I remember you speaking to us at times in the context of a study, and it might have been in the context of adults. My mother would drag us to everything, including higher level teaching with Brother Tom, former pastor of the church we went to. But so I just want to say, it's interesting to see this progress, but because there's a question I had about your ideas of the church in relation to school, government, and things like that. But go ahead, Jacob. What were you gonna
No,
say?
no, I was gonna say because I mean this is interesting because you said in the beginning that you were in education for 36 years and you saw a lot and you were part of a lot. And I don't think I know too many superintendents, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Art, that don't get fired. I feel like they all get fired. And am I wrong to say that you never were dismissed?
No, I was never fired. In fact,
That's the way. That's strange. That never
yeah,
happened.
when I was first hired with San Bernardino, my colleagues, other superintendents, when I first got to be a part of that group of people who were superintendents, one approached me and says, "Hey, just understand the bullet's already been fired. It's going to take you out. You just get all the best you can do is try to determine where it's going to hit." And so I remembered that saying, and so, but I never, I never let that concern me too much. You do what you're, if you have a purpose, you understand where you're going with things, and you know who you are in relation to your purpose and mission. It has an effect on other people around you, and people begin to support that. And I was blessed that people supported that. I even had people that didn't agree with me, but appreciated the manner in which conducted business. So no, I was never fired, and never came close to being fired. Even at the county, I was going to work for 4 years at the county level in LA,
Right.
but the board of supervisors convinced me to work one extra year. So if anything, it was the opposite. People tried to encourage me to stay on board. The average urban superintendent for large urban districts lasts 2.5 to 3 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I was there for 12. And so it was a good experience. Yeah.
But isn't it true, Art, that part of your success, and I might get the years off on this, but is some of your work in San Bernardino in terms of No Child Left Behind happened late 90s, early 2000s. And as a result of that, you had the hyper focus on school districts in California, especially, how are they doing? Who are the high performing schools? Who are the low performing schools? And you took your district and you took schools and you did it in a slow, you demonstrated kind of mastery and a slow master, maybe the kind of a slow progression of, success in reading and in math. And so it was something that you demonstrated. And then later on, you showed skill in, we want to say cutting the budget, but finding more beneficial resources for your schools. Do you want to talk about that for a
Sure.
moment?
Yeah, sure. When I was hired as superintendent in San Bernardino City Schools, it was 1999. George W. Bush was just elected for president. And one of his first things in office first year was he had the accountability factor that he was introducing of No Child Left Behind. And that was my gift in coming on board as a superintendent. It's an accountability system that really, when I look back, it really put a lot of poor, low income families type districts, which, by the way, San Bernardino was the second poorest urban setting in the country behind Detroit at the time. And so we had some big hurdles to try to overcome, and to try to keep in line with what No Child Left Behind was requiring. And keep in mind that if you did not show progress, the papers were brutal. I mean, the newspapers would really jump all over you, and so there was that incentive as well. But my thinking was, as a superintendent, we need to not think about short term or sensational type work, but to do progressive work that lets us move steadily and consistently, improving our positions and our progress, and to institutionalize programs that work well, so that even after, because my thinking was, even if I am fired, the program will be so good that whoever comes behind me will not be able to get rid of it because it's such a good program. So my thinking was, institutionalize your programs because they work, and do it incrementally so that it's consistently showing improvement. So over the years, even through No Child Left Behind, our test scores continue to improve steadily every year. And so, and we did get some accolades for that. And, that's on top of, the other challenges that we were experiencing in such a poor urban setting. I find it very rewarding.
A couple of thoughts I just want to mention. One, I remember those days of the press really, kind of bringing out the information and the schools that were low performing, high performing, and they would name names. They would name the principals. I remember the New Times LA Weekly, that's no longer around, but they would just call schools out, and it was wild times. The other thing, though, I like this idea of being willing to be in it and for the long haul. That you might not see the results that you want right away, but you see a growth incrementally, maybe, and then in a few years you see tremendous growth. So I can appreciate that type of thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. All right.
Ruben, let me respond to what Ruben is saying. The press didn't care how their bad reporting of our progress was and the impact it had on our teachers and our principals, our parents, is it had a very negative impact on good people who are doing great work in their schools, but weren't given credit for the amount of work that they were doing. I often told my teachers in San Bernardino City, because we were often compared to Redlands, they were the next city up, with very different socioeconomic group. And but we were often compared to them, and why can't you be more like Redlands? And I often told my teachers whenever I would have my meetings with them, I'd say, listen, I would put you guys up against any teacher in Redlands any day, because we had to adjust, we had to do more monitoring, we had to have more bags in our bag of tricks for kids that came from very deprived backgrounds. And so we had to have more skills, and we had to train our teachers better. And I saw some great things going on in our classroom. So I never paid much attention to what the press was saying about us, as long as we believed we were headed in the right direction.
And there was no sense of perspective, because I remember I was in a school that was labeled failed. It's a failed principal and a failed school. Like it's done, it's failed. That was my first year there, and who knows how long the principal. There was no reporting, no finding out who was good, why the school was low performing. Maybe it was past teachers. Nothing. It's just like, that's a failed school. That's a high performing school. So it was a real weird time. Yeah.
Well, and remember that the label of low performing, high performing was based on a single test. The testing, way of gauging whether they're successful or not. But there's so many other ways of gauging the success of schools. And like you said correctly, there's so many criteria and variables going on in a school that the press doesn't concern themselves with. They just go by a strict number from a test. So in that sense, I think it was a disservice to what was going on. Although I did agree that there should be accountability at the schools for academic rigor. And so I did agree with that, but just didn't like the way that it was reported out.
But that might be also part of why LA County of Education looked to you, is they saw through that and they said, okay, he had a tough gig there, and let's bring him over here and do that. And I was going to ask you that in your years, even in LA County, is there something that you're kind of proud of? I know it's a team effort. I know and I know you're at a different level where we're at, are the teachers, but you definitely are the supervisor and give these policies and programs, present those to the schools. Is there anything that you look back on and you go, wow, this is something I'm really proud of?
Yeah, I'll mention two things if
Sure.
I have time here. But the first thing was when I first became county superintendent in Los Angeles, they had the auditors from the state of California. The acronym for them is FICMAT. They're the auditors for school districts all over the state. And they approached me and said, Dr. Delgado, welcome to LA County. You will be bankrupt in two years. And so So that was a shock to my system. I didn't know that was the fiscal situation there. And so they said, unless you're able to come up with $25 million within the next couple of years, you'll be bankrupt. You won't be able to make payroll. So I got that. So in a year's time, we got to work on it. Not only did we meet the goal of saving $25 million the first fiscal year, but by the year two, we had saved $50 million. And we did that without laying people off, and we did that without really cutting programs. And so people that are listening might say, well, how the heck did he do it then? Well, the county was bloated with employees that really didn't have a huge function anymore. So I offered an early retirement incentive, and I had 400 people the first year take me up on the incentive, which automatically got me over the $25 million mark the following year. So that was good. That was a good, and that worked just really brilliantly, and I had a lot of support from people in the committee, and the board of supervisors were very, very happy about that. But the other program was the county schools are in charge of the court schools, the juvenile court schools, and LA County, being the largest county in the country, unfortunately also had the reputation of having the largest juvenile court school system in the country. And our court schools are expected to perform like any other public school, but with kids who've coming from very backgrounds that just have sad backgrounds and obstacles in their path, and many times unable to even read, much less perform at a high school level. So we were able to kind of tear the system down a little bit, give the teachers a new sense of direction and purpose for what they were doing, because our teachers saw themselves as an extension of probation officers, which they were not. They were educators. And our principals also saw themselves as an extension of probation officers. They were not. They're educators. And so we went through a process of retraining them, and we brought in career tech into the court school system. We allowed for our kids at the juvenile court schools to begin to catch up on their credits for graduation, because a lot of them had no hope of ever graduating. And we began to see kids in the juvenile court schools getting their diplomas and feeling like they were getting certificates for trades, which that was a huge plus for us. And we were recognized for that on a national level. And so that was a big plus. Now, since then, I think they've closed down a number of those schools just because of the government's push to incarcerate fewer kids who in the past would be incarcerated and no longer have the same system in place. So many of those schools have closed down, but I think they've maintained the same programs.
Yes, and as a former teacher of one of those county schools, I will say that it is a great challenge. But I was always appreciative of the services that LA County school, your offices had. There was, I think it's in Downey, that office, or one of them anyway. Yeah. But that's amazing. Some of those students are like forgotten. Some of those students are just kind of like, they're displaced, they're forgotten, and it's great that they were supported by LA County and through some of your work, Mr. Delgado. So
I wanted to share while you're sharing that. Yeah, that's where Ruben and I started. But thank God, we because those were tough years working with kids who are we called them at risk at the time, who were coming out of Los Padrinos and coming out of camps, but it was fulfilling to see them, like you're sharing out, some would graduate with a diploma. We saw that. We actually saw that. We went to the high school high school graduation. So for these kids, so it was great. But I was going to ask you a question when I knew we were going to have you on. I thought, I wonder what Dr. Delgado's thoughts are on the closure of possibly the Department of Education at the federal level. I'm not sure if you want to speak to that or not. Maybe that's a herring I shouldn't throw at you. But if you want,
yeah,
if you don't,
I don't mind addressing that. I mean, as a county superintendent of schools, and as a superintendent of San Bernardino City, I often would go to, at least once a year, go to Washington to visit Capitol Hill and talk to legislators and people who work within the Department of Education. And it's a political office. There's no doubt about that. Depending on who was president at the time, the kind of answers you'd receive from the Department of Education. But I was floored in one visit when it was just before the election of one administration, and the election was about to go, and I think it was at the end of George Bush's term. And what happened next was the Department of Education was still a year away from the election. And that's when I visited them. I went to go visit them to talk to their directors and hopefully to some of the people who were in charge there. And to my shocking surprise, sitting down with them, one of their first comments to me was, listen, we're glad you're here, but just understand we're not going to make any progress this year on any new programs or any new assistance that you might need. And so that floored me because, well, okay, explain that. I came here because we have these programs that we need assistance with. Why won't you assist us? Well, because we don't know who's going to be elected, what direction the election's going to go. So we want to wait and hold on until which time we see who our boss is going to be to know how we proceed. And it floored me because I thought, okay, I have kids in San Bernardino right now that need help today. And you're telling me you're not going to make a move because of politics and who's in charge. So I do feel the Department of Education needed some overhauling. I'm glad to see, the direction that I've heard, at least now, whether it follows through, how it plays itself out. It does need a complete overhaul. If not, and if it was eliminated, I would not be shocked under our now new president, President Trump. Wouldn't shock me. But I think there's other ways to do it. I mean, there's nothing in the United States Constitution that says the federal government's supposed to be involved anyway. But many of the incentives that came from the Department of Education were strictly to try to control the direction of our schools by offering a carrot of money attached to it, which often didn't get used the way it should be used. So I'm not sure getting rid of it is the best answer, but if it were to go away, I don't think it's going to have a negative impact on what goes on locally.
It seems like you hear the word Department of Education, and then if you eliminate it, that means education's eliminated. Like there's this mentality that people have through words that they get hypnotized, I think, sometimes. Same thing, like for a few years, I worked at a charter school. And when I would tell people this, I was also Uber driving, this is many years ago, 10 years ago at the time. And I remember telling somebody, I work at a charter school. And their response is, I don't support charter schools. And I said, oh, why not? And this man said, well, they don't allow special ed students in their schools. And I said, no, that's not true. We do. I'm the special ed teacher at my school. And I work at a charter school. No, that's impossible because charter schools don't allow SPED. And I just think that some people just get caught up in the words. Charter school evil, Department of Education good. I guess my question to you then is, what's your relationship with charter schools? And we've done a couple of videos on that, but is it fair to say charter school equals bad, or is it a little more complicated than that?
Oh no, it's much more complicated than that, and probably what your viewers or your listeners may not be aware of. I mean, another part of my experience as an educator has been to serve on the State Board of Education for their Charter School Advisory Board. And so I was very familiar with charter schools. And then the county offices, for example, mediate charter schools that get rejected by local school districts. So that was another one of my charges as county superintendent. So we saw a lot of charter schools come through. And in San Bernardino, there were a number of charter school petitions that came in, and we saw good ones and we saw bad ones, and there's some good ones, there's some excellent ones. Charter schools, we have to remember, charter schools were supposed to present something different, something creative that is different than what the school district already had in place. And when we saw a program that would come to us that way, that had qualified people in charge, because the biggest problem with charter schools is they go under real fast. Finances are a real problem for them. And they go under very quickly, and they get into financial trouble. And if you approve a charter for a school district, you're left holding the bag for a lot of families who, when a charter school closes down, it's traumatic. So, but we've seen some of those charter schools that are very poorly run, and we've seen some very good charter schools that have done great work. There's one in San Bernardino that started out as a charter school with the purpose of training local students on to go into the field of aviation. That's a unique program, and excellent. I mean, results. They've had excellent results, and lots of interest over there. So it's been very successful over the years. So, but we've seen others that come in with poor planning, very, very, no finances, financial stability, and those were really poor ones that would try to work their way all the way through the state board of the board of which, by the way, I sat on. So I would see them at the county level, and then I'd see them in Sacramento again, trying to still try to get approval to run their school with no real finances. So it's I'm not against charter schools. I'm in favor of them. They're public schools, and everybody is welcome to them. So I like the idea of charter schools, but if they're well run.
Yeah, and I think that's very important that you're making that distinction, that you have charter schools that are serving a lot of times local areas with specific needs and different learning values, right? Different learning ideas, and then you have maybe some yahoos come in with no plan, no preparation. There was a really incredible article 20 years ago at LA Weekly, and I was interviewed for it, where there was a guy just starting a charter school just to make money. It's a money making, ploy if you know what you're doing, and that was not long lasting. So I can appreciate you. And I just came from Granada Hills Charter. I was there for many years, and when you look at it, it's not a shock that it's done so well, because it went from LAUSD to a charter because you had all these parents trying to change. It was really parent run, and in a lot of ways, and it was parents wanting more rigor. That can only lead you to good things, many times. And it really shifted. It became a stronger school after it became a charter. So anyway, I really appreciate, you saying that.
I've had some good experiences with charters. Green Dot is another, larger organization that has had some success. And so I'm in favor of them if they're well run and if they're fiscally responsible. And oftentimes they're not. And we had one charter where the founder of the charter school hired her husband, hired her relatives as the treasurer or accountant for the. But next thing we knew, she was driving around expensive cars and remodeling homes and that type of thing. And so we saw some real dishonest things in some of our charter schools. So no, but by and large, I'm in favor of them if we can get good ones in.
No, thanks for sharing that. I definitely wanted to spend some time, although man, I have so many things I want to tell you. Now that we're talking, I want to ask him this, but I did for sure. There's a couple, like I said, there were a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about, and one of them was your foundation. I looked into it this last week. It's the Association of Christian Administrators and Educators. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your program, your foundation, and why it started? Why do you wanted to start that, and what's it all about?
Yeah, thanks for giving me that opportunity to talk about it, because it's really important to me. Once I retired, I stayed active with my circles of superintendents and educators, and remained in associations and the like. And what I began to hear from educators was, look, there's a lot of good things happening in education, but mostly our Christian community, those who are believers with a Christian worldview, are finding it more and more difficult to navigate within a public school setting, because in California in particular, there were regulations and laws that were coming forth that appeared. I'm saying appeared because sometimes it was often just in someone's mind, but appeared that they were hostile towards people who believed in Christ and who were Christians. And so, but I did find that Christian educators were not talking to each other about it. It was mostly backdoor type conversations, and nobody knew who was working where. And you know, and I happen to know there were a good number of strong Christian people in positions of leadership. And so the idea came across when I was working with Grand Canyon University, a Christian university, and I shared that with their vice president. I said, I would like to start in California an association that networks our Christian educators so they know that there are others like them, and they could share ideas about what works in their schools, things that are well within the rights of an educator to perform and within the guidelines of state curriculum, so that we can train them, equip them, support them, encourage them, and form a network in that area. The university loved the idea, and I was hoping to get their support financially. But to my surprise, what they said instead was, look, there's a group of around 5 other superintendents in other states that want to do something similar, and I've already started something like that called the Association of Christian Administrators. Why don't you join them and but form your own association in California? So that sounded good to me. And so I've been for the last couple of years, I've been working at trying to create a nonprofit, 501c3, to form a network of Christian educators out here for California. And we are an affiliate of ACA, or the Association of Christian Administrators, on a national level. So it started out as 5 or 6 states. We're now up to 11 states, including California. Uh-huh. And we meet once a year. In fact, this next week, we're going to be meeting at Grand Canyon University for our 2nd annual conference to get to know each other and to network with each other. What was once 5 is now 11. And if we can double every year like that, I think we'll be able to form a really powerful network of people who are in education, promoting for themselves a network of like believers in the public sector and private schools, because we believe in private schools as well. And so that's why Christopher Duran is a part of a board, because he's at Whittier Christian High School. And we need that. We need Christians also in that field to interact. We're not separated scripturally by private and public schools. So that's why I added the word "and educators" in our association. So we're ACAE. And it's taken off. We have about 150 members in our network. I'd kind of like to see more, but we do monthly devotionals for Christian educators throughout the state. And we do seminars. We have a seminar coming up in August locally in California. And so we invite other educators to join us for that.
That's great. Like if someone like Ruben or I would want to join your association, or are we able to, and how would we do that?
All you do is get on our website, acaecal.org. And there's a place for you to register. There's no cost. It's free. I mean, we're not charging anybody to be part of the network. And then from home, I look at those and include you in our network database. And so I just I'm just kind of doing it as I can. We hope to grow to the point where we're a 501c3 and eventually grow large enough that we can have some help with that. But we have some good people on the board. We have 2 Chris Durans. And I try to distinguish them by saying, well, one's Chris Duran Upland, the other one's Chris Duran Whittier. But when we're incorporating, we have, when you do your articles of incorporation, they ask who's on the board. And so I said, well, I better ask them for their middle names because that's the only way I'm going to distinguish whether both middle names are Michael. So
Jeez.
I said, oh my gosh, come on, you guys. So both Chris M. Durans. And
That's
but
funny.
they're both great assets to the board. The other Chris Duran is a high school teacher, a math teacher, and he has his own Christian club on campus that's doing just amazing work. For he's just a great guy, and so we're real happy to have as part of our board.
Wow.
But that's who we are, and that's what we're trying to do. It's I'm used to having a large staff as a county superintendent to say, well, here's what I need you to do for
Right.
me. Report back in a week. Let me know how it goes. Well, to my shock, I've got to do it all myself, and so I've got to learn a lot about social media and everything else. And, oh man, you're teaching some old dog some new tricks. That's tough.
Yeah. Wow.
I have one thought. I mean, there's another question I wanted to ask. But it's kind of like a curveball, sort of. And that is this: you've seen or both sides of it. You've seen it as a teacher, then you've seen the other side as an administrator. What would you say to a brand new teacher walking into the classroom for the first time? Here are the one or two most important things you need to do or be as a great educator.
Yeah. I'd say, and I've said this over and over again at all levels, teacher, principals, district office people, look, care about the people you work with. And for a teacher, care about your kids. Love them, because when you love somebody, and as a believer, if you pray for them, you're going to do everything you can to help them. And for example, Ruben, you're back on a special ed, and Jake, those are your backgrounds.
Yeah.
So how many times have you seen a student neglected because they're struggling with some real need, but nobody took the time to help them? And I have always told people, look, understand what your mission is as an educator, is to help these kids see a future for themselves. It's not to teach them how to read. It's not to teach them math or science. That's how we do it. But our mission is to help them see a future. And you help them see a future by teaching them how to read, by teaching them math. And that's the vehicle for it. And if they're struggling in those areas, they're not going to see a future for themselves. They're going to get defeated. They're going to end up in our juvenile court schools. They're going to end up doing things that aren't productive for themselves. So help them see that, and you'll do well. So that is probably the first piece. And the second thing I would always tell people is, don't get full of yourself. Ask for help when you need help. The world revolves around people that work together. I said, we're not in this by ourselves. And other people have already been where you are. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The ones that get in big trouble are the ones that are afraid to ask questions, and they continue to do things incorrectly and to the detriment of whoever they're working with. So I would say those would be the two biggest things. But there's a whole lot of more nuances to everything, which I had been able to do as a superintendent, to do training and staff development, which of course was a big presentation. But those two main things were, I would say,
There are nuances, but I want to say that what you said is so critical. The first one is, if you love your students, it kind of covers a lot of things, because you're going to want to grade all their papers. You're going to want to give them immediate feedback. You're going to want to make a very meaningful environment for them as they walk through the room. All the things that we talk about on this channel, is filtered through the idea of what you just said. Is, if you love them, you're going to want to do all these things. And then the second one is the thing I'm trying to do more often, and that is collaborating and asking for help. And if you don't have anybody immediately, if you're a high school teacher, this is, Jake, you'll see this is true, you can ask your students to help you. Bam. Anyway, thank you. Very good.
Yeah, that's good.
Wow.
But I did find at the higher level leadership offices, like your assistant superintendents and superintendents, they're often afraid to ask for help because they're afraid it's going to make them look weak, or make them look as if they're not qualified, or make them look as if they just lost. But I said, no. I ask questions all the time. Even as a superintendent, I would ask questions of other superintendents. I had the largest district in the county in San Marino and the largest county office in the country in LA County. But I would always pursue superintendents in small school districts and ask them, hey, what did you think of this, that, and the other? Because small school district superintendents, they didn't have a staff like I had staffs. I had specialists that would give me answers. I just have to ask them the right question. But small district superintendents would have to do it all themselves. So they have to be well versed in all areas. And so if I wanted good questions, good answers from people, I'd go to my colleagues and ask them. I wasn't afraid to ask questions. And in fact, it was Roy Romer from LAUSD. He was a governor in Colorado.
Yeah.
At one time became the superintendent in LAUSD. I remember meeting with him at a superintendent's meeting when he first came on board. And I really appreciated what he said. His first address to us, he said, look, I am not an expert in education. And I'm going to have to lean heavily on all of you, now my new colleagues, on how to help me with that. I will help you with the politics because I know politics. So if you need help with politics, give me a call. But in terms of being a superintendent, I'm going to have to lean on you guys. That to me, I respected that because to me, that's authentic. That's someone who knows what they're doing, knows what their purpose is, and knows their strengths and weaknesses. So I appreciated that.
Wow. You know, just thank you so much for being with us. This is like I shared before, there's so many things came to my mind that we don't always have somebody who's, you have 36 years of experience, not just being a superintendent, but being a teacher. And so, the things that Ruben and I go through when we have kids in front of us and the whole part where you love them. And so you've been there. So, we just thank you for being here with us today. And actually don't leave. We're going to say goodbye to the audience here, but stick with us for a second.
Well,
and,
before you say goodbye,
tell.
Let me put a plug in
Please.
For ACAE. Where is that camera? Right there. That's backwards, isn't it?
No.
ACAE CA network at gmail.com. ACAE CA network at gmail.com. If they want to contact me. I will be reading those emails of people that want to be a part of the network. Okay, so
yes,
word out there,
and we'll put it on. We'll link it to this video as well. Okay,
very good.
This episode. But thank you. Well, thanks again for joining us on Pod and Deliver. We hope you all had a good time tonight, like we did. See you soon. Bye bye.